Victor Von Doom, PhD, is a classic Marvel villain for a reason, but he's rarely been adapted particularly well. Yes, I'm looking at you in particular, Fant4stick. However, I'm here to tell you that the perfect Doctor Doom adaptation already exists, and it's to be found in the cartoon Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Pretty much ever since I started making videos on this show, people have been asking me to do one on Doom. And if you're not too familiar with this world and this character, you'd be forgiven for wondering why that is. After all, this is an Avengers show, not one about the Fantastic Four. Doom only shows up in 3 episodes, and one of those is a literal blink and you'll miss it cameo. There's only one episode of Earth's Mightiest Heroes which has Doom as the main villain, but I reckon if we take a look at that episode, we'll see why people are so fond of this depiction of Marvel's classic villain. We open with the Avengers' likenesses projected from some sort of evil computer device, with a voiceover going through each of the heroes' attributes, strengths, and weaknesses.
The Hulk. Strength enhanced by gamma radiation. Upper limit unknown. Threat level extreme.
There are 2 reasons why we're being shown this. The most obvious one is that this is the first episode of the show's 2nd season, and as such the show needs to introduce its core characters, in case there's any new viewers tuning in for the season premiere, or at the very least, to briefly reintroduce the cast to returning viewers after some time off the air. But this opening scene also works in a more interesting way, because when the camera pans around, we see the person looking at these files, the figure whose perspective we've been inhabiting is Doom. And let me tell you why that's interesting. Until now, the villains of this world, with the possible exception of, say, Kang, come into conflict with the Avengers externally. They're doing some crimes or hatching some schemes, and the Avengers rock up to stop them. They don't have a bird's eye view of the team, their dynamics, their strengths and weaknesses like we do. Even when characters like Loki or Ultron do their homework and think they've sussed out how to beat our heroes, there's always a detail they've overlooked, or a strength or spirit that leads to their downfall. And oftentimes, we the audience have an idea of this beforehand. For instance, think of the way the leader gets taken down. He didn't account for the otherworldly powers of Thor's hammer, which we'd seen previously, and so Thor uses this oversight to smash up his silly little mech suit. But returning to Doom, this episode's opening lets us know immediately that things are different here, because by framing this sequence in this way, by conflating the perspective of the viewer with that of Doom, at the same time that the show gives us this reintroduction to our heroes, the camera suggests that our level of knowledge as viewers is comparable to the information Doom possesses on the Avengers. And how does this sequence end? With Doom fully aware of the might of the Avengers, dismissing them as utterly beneath his own level. And the crazy thing is, as we'll soon find out, he's right. Doom manages to accomplish his plan in this episode, and he tramples over the Avengers to do so. We'll get to that shortly, but there's a couple of moments throughout this episode significant to Doom that I want to pick up on first. Moments that show just why this adaptation is such a successful one, and why this is a unique character within this world. So the Avengers and the Fantastic Four get attacked by Doom bots. It's all a ploy to distract the teams while Doom absconds with the Wasp and the Invisible Woman. But as they're fighting off attackers at the mansion, the Thing says this of Doom.
Victor Von Doom's been obsessed with Reed for years, always trying to prove he's smarter, or trying to take over the world, you know, the usual.
This is a summary that's broadly accurate for other versions of Doom that we've seen on screen, like for instance Victor as he appears in the Fox Fantastic Four films from the 2000s. But the best versions of Doom are more than this, and Ben's summary is countered almost immediately by T'Challa.
This is wrong. Dr. Doom has nothing to gain by attacking us here. This reeks of desperation, something he is not known for.
So clearly there's more to this Doom than an inferiority complex, an iron mask, and an Eastern European state of dubious geography. What's more, that indication that we got at the episode's start that Doom sees things from a more perceptive perspective than your average EMH villain is doubled down on when the Avengers arrive in Latveria. The team's big plan to create a diversion with the Quinjet while sneaking a cloaked Iron Man into Doomstadt is foiled within seconds. Also, remember when Doom's own intel ranked the Hulk as by far the most dangerous member of the Avengers? Yeah, well look what happens when Victor steps to him. This isn't a respect video. I'm not just gonna list Doom's accomplishments and wax lyrical about his strength. And I'm also not going to claim that this is a fantastic adaptation merely because of the buttery smooth gravitas of Lex Lang's voice performance, because there's a lot of villains in this show who are also strong and well performed. No, the real kicker comes at the episode's end, because after the Avengers and the FF have managed to rescue their captives, just about withstanding the solo thrashing Doom gives them, the stage looks set for a grand showdown between the might of these two super teams and the menace of Doom. But that doesn't happen. See for yourself.
You are trespassing on Latverian soil. Leave. Now.
Why, Victor? What did you even want?
You do not even see what is happening here.
Enough! We're moving out, people.
Now, if this were any other villain in any other episode of this show, we'd surely be seeing a technicolor marvel of lasers and explosions, as the team and the villain have their standard climactic showdown. But this doesn't happen. I think you could call this a subversion of the expectations we have for the medium of cartoon superhero shows. And it feels a bit weird. I mean, it is literally an anti-climax. But I think that's the point. What Earth's Mightiest Heroes is telling us is that Doom isn't like the other villains, not exactly. He isn't interested in what the Thing claimed earlier, that is, proving his might and his intelligence. No, T'Challa's words ring true instead. He always has a motivation beyond this, and will return to this idea. But about halfway through the second season, the first Doom episode, with its weird, kinda subversive ending, is paid off, as the Secret Invasion arc really gets going. We'd seen at the end of that first episode that the real reason for Doom's actions were related to the Skrulls. He'd managed to build a detection device and confirmed that the Invisible Woman was a sus imposter. And on the one hand, that's a cool beat. It confirms the fact that Doom knows more than anyone else, and the fact that he has his own agenda that isn't necessarily 100% villainous. But it isn't until this later episode, his final real appearance in this show, that this plot thread comes to fruition. He busts in on Tony, who's struggling to figure out what's going on with the little green men, and gives him the missing piece of the puzzle.
This has been designed to work in conjunction with your detection device. It will allow you to perform a genetic reset on the Skrulls.
This scene, I think, is the crux of what makes this Doom a fascinating character, and a fantastic adaptation. We've seen a lot of villains on this show, and we've seen a lot of heroes, but this Doom, in this moment, is revealed to be neither, really. He's not a good guy, and he's not a bad guy, he's just a guy. An immensely powerful guy, sure, but a character whose actions break down the firm boundaries between hero and villain inherent in the superhero genre. He's not an anti-hero or a baddie who had a change of heart either, because his reason for helping Tony isn't at all altruistic. Tony thinks Doom needs his tech to help flush out the Skrulls, but he doesn't. He just knows that if he gives this device to the Avengers, then they'll deal with the Skrulls and he won't have to lift a finger. He can go back to his own schemes. It's not altruism, it's not good or bad, it's efficiency, plain and simple. So that's the major thing I think this show does to set Doom apart from its other villainous characters, and indeed from other inferior adaptations of the character. Uniquely, Victor is a vector of power unto himself, removed from and above the dichotomy of morality within which the rest of the show's cast operates. And there's a lot of synergy here, I think, with what we saw earlier, the way Doom's power, strength, and knowledge all seem so far removed from what's typical for villains in this show. Other villains, even literal gods, haven't felt so utterly dismissive of the Avengers. But there's one other way this show captures Doom's uniqueness, and it's the way he barely appears. The moments I've shown you are more or less the only times he features in this world. We see a picture of him on screen in a later episode, resisting the forces of Emperor Stark, don't ask. But apart from this, he's hardly a major player in Earth's Mightiest Heroes. And this is interesting because it gives the impression that his interactions with the Avengers are only one small, insignificant segment of Doom's life, that he's got bigger things to worry about, and that from his perspective, the Avengers are just cameoing on the Doom show, not the other way around. As a result, this sense of implied autonomy goes further in differentiating this character from the rest of the show's rogues gallery, who tend to show up and then just get imprisoned by the Avengers, and if they get out or whatever, they just try and get even with the team. But with Doom, it's like they're just a tiny blip on his radar, and nothing more. You might say I'm making too much of this point, and his sparsity of appearance is due to the fact that he's traditionally a Fantastic Four villain rather than an Avengers villain, but A, he's often antagonized the Avengers in the comic books, and B, this fact didn't stop Avengers Assemble from having Doom be one of the major reoccurring villains of its first season. So there really was nothing stopping EMH from having him take up way more screen time, like figures such as Loki, Kang, Ultron, or even the Masters of Evil, but they showed restraint, and I think that's a decision that really works. Now, a word on adaptation. I've deliberately not tried to claim that this is a uniquely faithful adaptation of Doom from the comics. That's not to say that I don't think this version translates a lot of Doom's most enduring and well-liked attributes, because I do. But what would constitute a faithful adaptation of a character like Doom, who, even in the main Marvel Comics continuity, has changed so much over time? In EMH, we never see Doom toot on Namor's horn, for instance. And when Doom started out back in the 60s, I think it's fair to say he was more of a straightforward villain than he's become recently. So it's hard to conceptualize any sort of core essential Doom, which can then be adapted in new media, because that sort of character consistency doesn't really exist in a medium where the same character has been written by literally hundreds of people across the years. But I do think, at the very least, that many of the qualities and traits which have stuck with Doom for the past few decades are depicted wonderfully in Earth's Mightiest Heroes. His might, his intelligence, his justifiable arrogance, and the sense we, the audience, get that he's just a little bit above all this superhero nonsense. And I do think that when the MCU gets round to adapting this character, they do well to take a leaf or two out of Earth's Mightiest Heroes' book. So there you have it, the Doom video. Much requested, so I hope it lives up to the hype. Sebastian Von Doom, this one's for you. If you're new here, I've got a whole bunch of other videos on this show, and what made it so special. And if you feel like supporting me, then I just launched a Patreon the other day, where depending on what tier you pick, you can get access to bonus videos, suggest and vote on video topics, and even get access and reuse the original music I use sometimes in my videos. But even in the basic tier, which is £2 a month, which is like $3 I think, you'll get access to the bonus videos, and there's one up already, and it's on the first year of Marvel Disney+, trying to figure out how well or poorly Marvel Studios have embraced the television format. But if you don't fancy doing that, or you haven't got the dough to spare, you can also help support the channel by just liking the video. So thanks for watching, and a big thanks to my patrons on screen now, and especially Ian Fifield.